We're going to talk about the royal family and profit from their property and land holdings. It's more than doubled to...
a record £1.1 billion. There's money in land, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Yeah, that's a
Anyway, it's this big report. It includes the cost of the coronation and all the visits made by the royals all over the past year. Who has been looking through it for us? But GB News reporter Charlie Peters. So it's complex, I expect, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. The sovereign grant, it's £86.3 million for this year. It's stayed the same for a few years now. And that's based on a percentage, 15%, of the income that the Crown Estate gathers. That's £16 billion property portfolio. All that cash goes to the Treasury and they send back a portion that the royal household can use to spend on the day-to-day running of their various costs and their official duties. So what did they spend that money on? That's the real question.
What do we get stuck into first?
In Buckingham Palace, there were significant costs. You can manage the running of staff and the pay. I think we have a graphic to display some of those costs now. So the King's coronation was £800,000, and we also had...
Is that all?
Well, I think that's a pretty good value for money. Quite a lot of that was resizing the imperial crown on those various robes.
Wow.
So you have the expenditure was 89.1. That's higher than the 86.3 I mentioned, and that's slightly higher because they get additional income, about £10 million from the gate receipts from the various palaces, and that number has shot up since the end of the COVID experience. Royal engagements, 4.2 million. I think that's pretty good value for money, most would say. And then the monarchy per capita, what each taxpayer pays per person, it's £1.29. That's including the refurbishment of Buckingham Palace. When you go to the core grant, which is around £50 million, what they're given, that 15%, that's 77 pence per person, per taxpayer in Britain, going towards the royal family. So
that's good value. I think that's good value.
Yeah, they're going to show that as good value for money. That's definitely the perspective they're putting across. But there are quite a few interesting costs involved in this sovereign grant review. There's been a lot of focus on the monarchy being green, being more diverse, trying to modernise the monarchy, possibly in keeping with modern political trends, which the monarchy hasn't always done in the past. And they've referred to their rising in sustainable aviation fuel. Now, a core part of the cost of the monarchy is travel. As we know, we had a significant cost last year, a trip to Kenya by Her Majesty's costing over £170,000, another trip to France costing a similar amount, trying to reduce not only the financial cost of that travel, but also the environmental cost as well.
The trip to Kenya was £170,000. I mean, I think that's pretty good reason. It's quite cheap, actually.
For a charter plane and the separate plane for staff as well.
And the ceremony that has to go with it.
Of course.
And putting them up in wherever they stayed and all the rest of it. That doesn't seem too expensive to me.
Of course, but in a cost of living crisis where people fear that we're missing meals and there are increasing concerns about energy supplies for families, heating and eating are political issues now. With that in the spotlight, the royal family are obviously extremely keen to demonstrate that value for money at all levels. Every penny has to be justified and every impact on the environment as well. And so they're promoting the rise of sustainable aviation fuel. King Charles, when he was the Prince of Wales, was famous for having a car running on cheese and wine, as it were, the biofuel input. And it's now understood that there will be increased levels of that same fuel, biofuel, going into the new helicopters that they've brought in, and also possibly the state Bentleys. So whatever they are replaced as in the future, those state cars that carry around the Royal Majesties and also the princes and princesses, those cars could be running on similar fuel that King Charles has been driving in his Aston Martin for 50 years.
True. It's interesting that this particular report looks into how much they're costing us, but it doesn't say how much they make for us as a country, because, I mean, I never know what the figure is, but the sheer fact that we have a royal family and that we have big ceremonies and things actually brings an awful lot of money into Britain, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, with these reports, and there's so much detail, I mean, there are dozens of pages about cash, bluntly, people can often get caught in the cost and the price of everything, but the value of nothing, failing to look at the bigger picture and the value of the royal family and what it brings to the nation, and also how it increasingly reflects the political impulses of ordinary people, as we're talking about these cost of living pressures, these green pressures. And also, people might say that they shouldn't be so engaged with modern political trends, but they are focusing very keenly on diversity. Now, not only for the gender pay gap, but they're also focusing on their ethnic pay gap. They've made reports there that that's closing. They've published that for the first time. But also the percentage of staff that come from an ethnic minority background within the royal household, that's 11.4%. Now, they have a target in the royal family to hit a 15% background of ethnic minorities within the household by 2025. So essentially, we have the royal family having quotas for minorities. I think that's quite controversial, actually.
Yes,
it's quite controversial they're doing that.
There's somebody, presumably a department within Buckingham Palace, that has to think of all these things.
Yes, well, and there have been a couple of race rows in recent years in the royal family, of course. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex accusing the royal family of racism in that very charged Oprah Winfrey interview. Now, critics might ask, is a racial quota in your staff the right way to go about it? But that's something they're proud to. That's something they're proud to tout in this recent report. They're very keen on that perspective.
Did you have to go to Buckingham Palace to be briefed on all of this?
I did yesterday. Although
did they give you a cup of tea and a biscuit?
Yes, and I'm happy to report that I swirled the teaspoon very gently without touching the edges.
Oh, very good. That's the way it must be done? Because they don't give you much in the way of cups of teas and biscuits.
We do all this talk about the money they earn and the money they have and things. I tell you what, my experience of circling the royals, interviewing the royals, being in Buckingham Palace and Clarence House and various other places all over the last 40 years, I wouldn't want their life.
No.
There's nothing about their decor. There's nothing about their sofas. There's nothing about their televisions. There's nothing. You don't walk in and say, wow, look at this. This looks as if they earn 26 million quid a year. It doesn't. I mean, I can't see the joy. I can understand the privilege and the travel and the experiences and all that they get. But at the end of the day, if you're a young person, you would want certain things in a new house starting out.
And possibly the freedom to live your life without the graft of hundreds of royal duties, official duties every 15 seconds.
I wouldn't envy them at all.
Very good, Charlie. Thanks very much indeed. Very interesting stuff there, Charlie.
I cannot get over the coronation only costing like 800 grand. I thought it'd be in the millions.
Well,
I suppose certain things don't get factored in, like
the police costs, etc. Yes, this is the cost from the household in particular. It's pretty costly to get a crown sorted out these days.
Yes, clearly. I'm glad I don't have the worry.
We've got Claire, we've got Mike. They've got the newspapers. They're going through the top stories of the day and getting their reaction and your reaction to that right after this.